So I want to talk today about discipline. I've been thinking a lot about this topic as I work on my new book about cultivating a deep life in a distracted world. If you want to succeed with that goal, you need discipline. So it's worth looking closer at this concept. So here's my plan for today. I'll define more specifically what I mean by discipline. I'll look closer at how it actually works. Then we will leverage this understanding to explore a new strategy, something I call the discipline ladder, for helping you improve your capacity for discipline in your own life. All right, so let's start with definitions. What do we mean when we say discipline? It has a lot of different meanings. The way I want to pin it down for our discussion here is the ability to do something that's hard and important, even if you don't want to do it in the moment. So a big mistake we often make is that we think about discipline as being an abstract binary trait, something you have or you don't. In this type of thinking, a quote unquote disciplined person could just go and do hard things, and an undisciplined person can't do anything hard. This is not actually how it works. Discipline is not like eye color, an prescriptive trait that you just have or don't have. It's a capacity. It's a capacity that can vary between people, and it can vary with the same person between different times of their lives. So to simply say, I am disciplined, that's way too vague. It's like saying, I'm a runner. That doesn't mean much to me until I know how fast you can actually run. So the same holds for discipline. There's many different gradations of discipline capacity. And what matters is where exactly you are on that scale. So let's talk today about how we can actually increase your discipline capacity. And to do so, I want to get technical. What happens inside your brain and your body when you decide to take on a hard task, something that required discipline? Like, okay, I want to write a newsletter essay or go do a hard workout. There is a strong physiological response to this intention. Even as you just begin to consider doing the task, chemicals will spread throughout your body and your brain that will give you potentially a sense of aversion to that task. At the same time, easier alternative activities will suddenly emerge in your mind as being appealing, sort of increasingly appealing. Think about this, right? When last time you sat down at your computer to do something hard, while you had that instinct to rotate through a bunch of news sites or news feeds or social media sites, suddenly that became very appealing just as you were considering doing something hard. Let's give a name to this chemical reaction. I call it the chemical obstacle to focused reaction. So it's like this chemical obstacle is something that emerges as you consider doing something hard, and it persists even as you begin that hard action. Discipline, then, we could say, requires you to overcome this chemical obstacle and continue through towards the action that you want to complete. Therefore, your discipline capacity, this is not abstract. It's not a character trait. It's not mysterious. We can describe it as a combination of two things: the magnitude of the chemical obstacle to focused action that you face, so how intense is that aversion, and the size of such chemical obstacles that you are comfortable overcoming. The combination of those two things tells you how hard of something you can actually tackle in your own life. All right, so how do we improve this capacity? There's a couple direct strategies that we already know about, right? Dedicated locations. So having a location that you only use for working on particular discipline requiring activities. That works because it reduces the distraction and therefore reduces the level of the chemical obstacle to focused reaction. Action. Nootropic drugs, like you would assign to someone who has attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder. They also directly help discipline capacity by increasing your ability to overcome the chemical obstacles that are there. So we have these types of solutions that directly help your discipline capacity that we can understand now more clearly when we understand what actually determines discipline capacity. Today, I want to give you another technique that can help here, and it's what I call the discipline ladder. Now, the idea here is that you can practice overcoming these obstacles, that with practice, your discipline capacity can increase. And this comes for two reasons. As you practice doing hard things and pushing through into those hard things are complete, two things happen. One, you become more comfortable with the physiological feeling of the chemical obstacle to focused activity. You just are used to it, just like an athlete gets used to the muscle burn of a particular athletic event. It doesn't scare them or push them off. They just know this is part of it. Or like, it's baseball season. A relief pitcher just gets used to the nerves. I'm going to feel really, really bad as I'm about to walk out, right, in game 2 of the NLDS. I'm going to feel really bad anxiety, right? It's going to feel really bad. I'm used to that. That's what it feels to be a pitcher. That's the job, is can you throw this ball hard even when your body is in this really innervated state? The second thing that comes with practice of discipline activities is you become more familiar with the rewards of actually completing this work. Your reward circuits encode this. So your mind now has positive associations with the hard task you're considering taking on. Therefore, the size of the chemical obstacle to focus activity reduces, right? So with practice, we become more used to it and we reduce the obstacle we have to overcome. Doing hard things, in other words, makes it easier to do hard things. Now, the problem here is this is circular logic. I have to finish hard things so that I'll be able to finish hard things. Circular. So how do we break that recursion? We systematically ladder up the difficulty of the hard things we do. You start with things that are pretty easy, but still require discipline. And then as you get used to completing those, you move up to a slightly more difficult ask. Slightly more discipline is required. Once you accomplish those regularly, you move up to the next level. So you ladder yourself systematically up levels of difficulty. And you're systematic about this. Just like if you're a weightlifter, you have to keep increasing the level of weight you're lifting for your muscle to continue to grow, but you have to be careful about how you do this. You can't just jump to the really heavy weight, but you also can't just stay on the weight that you're comfortable. You have to systematically and incrementally increase that weight. A year later, you're now much stronger and much more comfortable with much bigger weights than you were at the beginning. So I want to argue that you should do something similar with discipline. So I'm going to give you here an example ladder, and I'm going to walk you through the different levels of this ladder. I recommend starting with a daily metric. We've talked about this before on the show. A daily metric is something you can check off every day. For example, in the metric tracking space, if you use a time block planner, saying that you did this activity. You start with a daily metric. Now, the key thing of a lot of these daily metric activities, especially when you're getting started with a new pursuit, is that they can be very easy. And what you should be looking for when you're beginning on the discipline ladder is to find an activity that is not trivial, but still very comfortable in the array of what we would call the range of what we would call attractable. These should be activities that don't require, for example, when you're first starting up the discipline ladder, that shouldn't require that you schedule time in advance. It's just something you want to get around to doing each day when you can find time. So for the case of a case study, let's follow a sort of physical getting in better shape discipline ladder here. The daily metric you might start with here could be doing 25 push-ups a day. You don't got to put this on your calendar. You don't got to make a big production about putting aside a lot of time. It's just in the morning, at lunchtime, I didn't get to it. Let me just knock this off real quick before I get ready for bed. You can find time to do this. It's not trivial. Trivial would be touch your toes once, right? You're actually doing something that requires, it's exercise and requires muscles. But it's tractable. It doesn't require that much extra planning. All right, so you start with a daily metric when you're going up the discipline ladder. You get used to that. You check it off. You do it every day. You see that you've done it. And now you kind of feel, okay, I can sort of do regular work towards this general initiative. I can do it regularly, even if I don't want to. This is important to me. The next step on the ladder, I would suggest, is a 15-minute project. 15 minutes. It doesn't have to be every day. It should be at least 3 days a week. This requires a little scheduling. 15 minutes is enough time that you probably want to mark where you're going to do these 15 minutes. Before I go to work, right after the workday is over, I'm going to take extra time on my lunch break, right? It's long enough that it requires a little bit of scheduling, but it's not that much time, and you don't have to do that much during this actual period. So returning to our case study here of getting in better shape, your 15-minute project might be you get one of these like 10 or 15-minute, I'm going to say 10-minute because it takes time to get changed or whatever. Get one of these 10-minute YouTube body weight workouts 3 or 4 times a week, maybe first thing in the morning or right after work. I throw on like my gym clothes at home, load up on YouTube, hey, 10-minute body weight workout. I do these sometimes when we're on vacation, just want to keep moving. They're like, yeah, it's push-ups, it's squats, it's sit-ups or whatever. This is not a huge ask, but now it's getting a little bit less trivial, right? Like it's an actual workout. You don't have to muster massive motivation because it doesn't take a super long time, but now like you actually are doing something on a semi-regular basis that like in theory is getting you in better shape.
Hey, it's Cal. I wanted to interrupt briefly to say that if you're enjoying this video, then you need to check out my new book, Slow Productivity, The Lost Art of Accomplishment Without Burnout. This is like the Bible for most of the ideas we talk about here in these videos. You can get a free excerpt at calnewport.com/slow. I know you're going to like it. Check it out. Now let's get back to the video.
All right. Once you're used to that, the next step on the discipline ladder is going to be what I call the 60-minute easy project. Now you're putting aside, again, 3+ times a week, a non-trivial block of time, somewhere between 45 to 90 minutes. You definitely have to schedule this. In fact, you probably want to autopilot schedule this, have this time on your calendar in advance, just these times, these days, this is when I do this. But keep what you're doing during this time block easy. All right. So now you're getting used to putting aside the amount of time required to make serious progress on something. But you're keeping the actual work in this time block still pretty tractable because the difficulty you're getting used to here is putting aside the time. That's what you're getting used to here. Not, you don't want to compound that with the thing you're doing being really hard as well. So going back to our workout case study, maybe now you're running a real workout program, not a hard one, but like an actual like 30, 40-minute workout that you're doing 3 times a week. Right? And it could be on YouTube. When I was restarting my workout program back, this was back during COVID, I was using to get back into it. My wife's Peloton has workouts on it as well. You're like, oh, I want to do like a lower body workout. I want it to be 20 minutes or 30 minutes. And they're not too bad. They're not that hard. It's not an intense split program. It's not really pushing heavy weights. But it was more, so I didn't have the impediment of like, oh my God, this is going to be brutal. But it just got me sort of back up to speed with like, I put aside time to exercise this non-trivial time. All right. And then finally, the final step up the ladder is not increasing the time, but increasing the hardness of what you're doing in that time. 60-minute plus projects successively harder. Kind of take that same time, but increase the intensity of what you're doing in there. So to our workout example, now you're going to maybe sub in an actual pretty like intense split workout, real weights. Maybe you're doing at a gym now, really kind of trying to push to build muscles. Or if it's a cardio oriented thing, I'm really doing real interval training, really trying to actually increase my capacity here. And then you can successively increase the hardness of what's in that 60-minute block. That's an example discipline ladder. You start with something really easy. It's a check mark for something that takes 3 minutes. And you end up with like spending an hour plus 3 or 4 times a week doing something that's really hard. If you jumped straight to this final step and you're not used to doing these type of things, you might struggle. But if you work your way up the ladder, you'll get there in about 6 months. And no particular step will seem all that hard. Now, here's the key part about the discipline ladder. I think it's something that people they often get wrong. The goal is this is not a technique for everything hard you want to do. So the way you apply the discipline ladder is you don't say, okay, here's a new thing I want to do. I'm going to ladder my way up to doing it at the full level of difficulty. The discipline ladder is about practice with doing hard things. So if you complete this ladder here for fitness that we just talked about, now when it comes time to do something unrelated, you can just jump in at a much harder level and be much more comfortable because you've gotten practice doing hard things. So the ladder is something you do to get used to doing hard things. And then going forward, you're more comfortable jumping straight into hard things. So you don't have to break up every hard thing you do into these multiple different steps. This is something that you do once or twice to get your capacity increased. Or if you've gone through a fallow period and you want to restart your energy for like a new year and I want to tackle hard things, do one ladder to get your comfort with the chemical obstacle to focused activity, to get that comfort higher to reduce those peaks. And now you're ready to go on lots of different things. All right, so that's the discipline ladder. One way among many to increase your discipline capacity.
So you basically probably did your ladder 20 years ago, and now like your writing sessions are an example of hard things?
Yeah. I mean, and sometimes I'll do modified ladders just to sort of get back into it, just to sort of get my my energy back into it. Sometimes if it's a really different domain, you might ladder. Like I'm very used to writing and the discipline required for writing. But when I was restarting my physical stuff, like during the pandemic, I felt like I had to ladder back up there. It was kind of different enough. I wanted to get more used to the physical domain. So you could find yourself laddering to like re-energize yourself, or if there's like a brand new area that you're not used to acting in, the ladder can help you get used to that area in your life and doing hard things in that area in your life. And I think the physical intellectual is a kind of a classic split. If you're not used to physical stuff, you got to get used to it, right? Or if you're a physical person who isn't used to doing intellectual stuff, you might have to run a new ladder over there. There's an idea of modified ladders. So even if you're used to doing something, if you have like a really hard endeavor, to do a less hard version for a while and then to take one step up to the full hard version, that's a good strategy as well. You can kind of do that whenever. You're like, okay, I'm taking on like a really big project. Why don't I do an easier version of this for a few months just to get like my head space into this like type of work and to get the time put aside. And then once I'm used to the time being put aside, let me increase the difficulty. That I'll sometimes do, like get used to a schedule and then increase the intensity. So I don't have to double up getting used to a new schedule and the increased intensity all at once. So laddering in a lot of different ways could be useful, but the full ladder, yeah, you don't have to do that often. All right, we got some good discipline-related questions coming up. But first, let's hear from a sponsor. I'll talk about our friends here at Cozy Earth. Longtime listeners know I am a Cozy Earth fanatic. My wife and I have a lot of Cozy Earth products because we love, in particular, their fabric, this sort of bamboo, premium viscose bamboo-based fabric we just love. So we have the sheets. We have multiple pairs of the sheets. I've told you this before, so that if one pair is being washed, we have another pair to be put on. We have the towels. My wife has the pajamas. I have the sweatshirt. We just put on last week the duvet cover made out of this same material. So I'm just a big fan of Cozy Earth and the material. I suggest start with the sheets. If you want to get started with the Cozy Earth experience, that will make you a believer. It's just very comfortable. It regulates the temperature. It's not hot. It's just we love the comfort of that fabric. So I'm a big Cozy Earth believer. If you want to become a Cozy Earth addict like me, start with the sheets and then you'll be Cozy Earthing everything in your life. It just feels really good. So wrap yourself in luxury this fall with Cozy Earth. Go to cozyearth.com/deep and use the code DEEP for an exclusive discount of up to 40% off. You want to get that discount. So that's cozyearth.com/deep and use that code DEEP. If you get a post-purchase survey, take a moment to say you heard about Cozy Earth from my podcast, Deep Questions with Cal Newport. That makes a big difference for us here at the show. Speaking of comfortable fabric, I also want to talk about our friends at Rhone, and in particular, their commuter collection. Look, here's the thing. Men's closets were due for a radical reinvention, and Rhone stepped up to the challenge. The Rhone's commuter collection is the most comfortable, breathable, and flexible set of products known to man. And here's why. They have a product for every occasion. So the collection has pants. It has dress shirts. It has quarter zips. It has polos. You never have to worry about what to wear when you have the commuter collection. Their 4-way stretch fabric is fantastic. It's lightweight, it's flexible, it stretches, and it's breathable. You don't overheat. This is what I love about it. If I'm spending a day on campus giving meetings and speaking in panels, or I'm going on a speaking event, I generate a lot of heat, and I want lightweight, flexible fabric. It has wrinkle release, which I love. You can travel with this. You put it on, the wrinkles disappear as you wear it, so you don't have to worry about trying to iron your clothes. You're going to look neat. It even has Gold Fusion anti-odor technology, so you'll be smelling fresh and clean all day long. I'm a big fan of the Commuter Collection. It is the right clothes if you want to look good, but you're getting after it and you want to be comfortable as well. Now, the Commuter Collection can get you through any workday and straight into whatever comes next. Head to roan.com/Cal and use the promo code CAL to save 20% off your entire order. That's 20% off your entire order when you head to RHONE.com/Cal and use code CAL. It's time to find your corner office comfort. All right, Jesse, let's get some questions. Who do we got first?
First question's from Sully. When a twinge of procrastination strikes, I distract myself away from the hard things I'm working on. Sometimes I can fight off the urge by pausing and recognizing the urge, but often I lose and end up distracting myself with useless websites and other easier tasks instead of just doing the hard thing.
All right, well, this is a discipline question, right? I mean, this was our definition of discipline from the deep dive. The ability to do something hard that is important, but not like absolutely urgent, even when you don't want to do it in the moment. All right, there's two things that helps with discipline, what we talked about today and what we talked about a few weeks ago in earlier episodes. So the thing we talked about a few weeks ago, and I'll just remind you of this, is that it really helps if your mind has a plan it believes on for what you're trying to do and is on board about the potential rewards, right? Our mind is very good at simulating the future. If it does not have a clear simulation about what you're trying to do and where it's going to lead you, a simulation at trust, it's less likely to generate a sense of motivation. So if you're just coming at one of these hard things you're talking about here somewhat blindly, I don't know, let's just write. Let's just like go to the gym with quotation marks and get in shape. Your mind is going to say, wait, what's the plan here? I don't see a clear plan with which I have experience that's going to lead us likely to an outcome that I'm excited about. You don't get motivation. And those potential distractions are going to emerge as being much more appealing. So you want to make sure, first of all, that you really understand what it is you're trying to do and how it is that people actually succeed at what you're trying to do. Your mind has to trust your plan. You also need to expose yourself constantly to the rewards at stake here so that your mind has a very vivid encoding of the rewards in your hippocampus. That's going to play a big role when the planning system's trying to figure out whether or not it bestows you motivation. All right. Now, the second thing that matters is what we just talked about in the deep dive. Are you comfortable with this level of discipline? That is your mind comfortable with facing the chemical obstacle to focused activity that you're facing with this particular work? And if it's not, if that chemical obstacle is too large or it's too scary for you, try a discipline ladder. Start on easier things and work your way up to get yourself more used to tackling things of that level of difficulty. Discipline is practice, and you might need to practice discipline a little bit more. All right, what do we got next?
Next question is from Jess. How can I pick daily metrics that really move my life values forward? I have a toddler, so implementing my daily metrics is tough. The different routines of Ferris and Huberman, like looking at the sun in the first hour, 5-minute journal, phone off for the first hour, cold plunge, they seem generic and not personal.
Well, look, keep in mind, caring for a toddler is just as difficult as any of the routines that Andrew Huberman does, right? There's just different routines for different people, different routines for different life circumstances. And I agree with you. You want to find the things that really matter for you, that are personal for you, that are important for the things that you value. And it's perfectly fine if the things that really get you motivated are not the same things that get Andrew Huberman motivated. All right. So let's think about it. Daily metrics. Let's define this for the audience first. I talk about this, that it's important that the things that are important to you, that you have something you do on them regularly. When you're working on making your life deeper, I suggest keystone habits. So these are daily metrics that are not hard, not trivial, but not tractable in the areas of your life that are important, just so that you signal to yourself that you're willing to do non-urgent things on different areas of your life that are important. It's a good self-signaling mechanism. When seeking these out, custom fit them to what matters to you in your life right now, right? Reading a book every day to your toddler, I definitely did this when my kids were babies, maybe toddler age as well. Not long books, like we're talking Blue Truck, which, by the way, I could probably still recite word for word if I needed to right now. I know more about Blue Truck than I know about almost any other topic. That's a really good daily metric. It's like, I want to read its connection. I want to just establish that like I'm exposing my kid to words. When you have young kids, you yourself reading a chapter of an interesting book about an idea that's interesting every day, that could be a very interesting daily metric, right? Because it's not about, I want to finish a book every week. It's, I want to make sure that even amidst all these other pulls on my life, I'm still engaging in the world of ideas, even if it's minimal right now, right? Like that could be a very meaningful daily metric. Getting outside, being outside and running a gratitude exercise. I used to do this a lot when my kids were young. It would be with the kid. I'd be pushing someone in a stroller or someone would be strapped on. Like you got to get outside and you got to go. I had a particular gratitude exercise I would do where I'd predict, I would look into the future and think about some of the things that are hard right now with young kid childcare will be easier at this point in the future. And I'm really looking forward to that. And I wanted to do it outside. I wanted to do it with sunlight. And that was like really important. And that was a really important, daily metric that I would do. If you're working right now as well outside of the home, you might want to have a really clear metric about I'm tracking deep work hours to make sure that whatever windows of time I have in which I'm not involved in childcare. So if my kid is at daycare or something like this, and I have, here's my day when I can just be working at the office or at home and I'm not taking care of a kid, I want to make sure that I am getting in some protected hours, and I'm insisting on that every day. Even if it's small, it's again signaling to yourself, I'm not just an email answering machine. I'm not just a meeting attending machine. I'm a mind that can produce original value, and I'm going to protect it, even if it's just an hour a day, and I'm going to mark it every day so I remember to do that. So like what your daily metrics look like at this stage of life is going to be different than what it looked like 10 years ago. I can tell you on the other end of it, all my kids are elementary, middle school age. It'll look different then. And it'll look very different than what Andrew Huberman or Tim Ferriss care about. And they're all fine. Let me give you one extra hack to do, the sick day hack. So if I'm sick, I write on my metric tracking space in my time block planner, sick, capital letters. I don't put any metrics down. It's like, look, I'm sick. I'm not going to care about doing the metrics. Maybe I'll do some of them, but I'm not going to prioritize them. You can have a couple outs like that, right? Like if you have young kids, you can have an out that just says chaos. You don't want to be using this all the time, but it's like, oh my God, like my kid's daycare is closed and I have to do these important meetings and there's a new deadline that popped up. We're not worrying about our daily metrics, like making sure you do this, this, and this each day, reading this chapter, doing this, whatever. I'm going to write chaos in my metric tracking space and just give myself permission to survive. And that's absolutely fine. Now, if you find yourself writing chaos again and again and again, week after week, month after month, that's a useful signal that your life is too chaotic. It's not sustainable what you're doing. But I think it's like a great way of not feeling guilty about, I can't do this every time. Some days just get away from me. It's a way of just declaring metric bankruptcy for that day. It's like, it's okay. I'll be back at it tomorrow. All right. So Jess, I think you're doing great. Make the metrics work for you, or alternatively, bring that toddler into the cold plunge with you, because it's never too early to get hard. You got to get hard, like David Goggins says. So there we go. All right. What do we got next, Jesse?
Next question is from Virtue. I can work consistently and disciplined without relying on external motivations towards a goal. However, when something negative happens, like a rejection, my discipline starts to break down and I begin to focus more on the negative. In this situation, what would you recommend I do to get back to my routines?
That's a great question. And it's something I've thought a lot about. I mean, I face this a lot in my own life. I would say that the period of my life where I really began facing this consistently for the first time, where I actually had to think about systematically, how do I deal with a focused effort leading to a bad outcome? The time when I first started systematically thinking about this was actually as a graduate student, and the event would be papers being rejected. I need to publish papers, right, to get a job. I thought this was a good paper. It got rejected. Because in the life of a computer scientist, a theoretical computer scientist, you submit a lot of papers to its conferences, and they're incredibly competitive, and they have low acceptance rates, 20%, 15% acceptance rates, and you're trying to be good enough to get accepted. So I developed some ideas. I'm going to share some of these ideas with you as well. If it's a serious negative event, and I'm assuming right now we're talking about something big enough to really throw you for a loop, not someone, said something mean to you in passing, but like a real rejection or a failure of a project, or not getting a promotion or not getting a job, right? More major things. It's okay to give it a day or so to fester. Don't immediately pretend like it doesn't exist. Be upset, commiserate, talk to friends or family. You have a drink that night. That's okay. Like, lean into the emotion a little bit. Like, I really wanted this to go well, and it didn't. And I'm kind of upset and worried that it didn't. Part of the advantage of doing this, especially around other people, is that it removes or reduces the ego defense, right? You might have this initial reaction of like, man, this looks negative for me, and I want to kind of try to hide this, and I want to try to convince everyone that I'm perfect and I only ever succeed. If you start commiserating, it's like a relief. You've taken down the ego defense. Like, okay, I can just admit, like, this, I wanted this to go well and it didn't, and I'm embarrassed it didn't go well. It takes that ego wall out of there, and this is going to make it much easier for you to actually move on. You're going to be much less defensive about the whole situation. So take a day or two and let it fester. Next, you need to figure out a plan for what comes next. This means you're going to have to do somewhat of a postmortem. What went wrong here? And it's got to be an honest postmortem. You really want the real answer. And this might mean actually getting an unvarnished opinion from someone else, talking to someone else. Why do you think I didn't get this? Or why was this paper rejected, right? Or it's just an honest self-assessment. Like, let's say you had a big exam and you did really poor on it, right? You want to go back and say, what went wrong here? Like, how did I prepare for this? What worked? What didn't? What did I do too much of? What did I not do enough of, right? So you really want to understand what went wrong, and then make decisions. Is there an adjustment needed? And sometimes the answer will be yes, right? If it's like a test you did really bad on and you do a postmortem, you'll probably figure out, oh, there was a much better way I should have studied for this. So going forward, this is how I'm going to study for future tests like this. I learned from that failure. Or if it was an academic paper that got rejected, you're like, okay, the quality is just not there. I need more results. The results have to be harder. The whatever it is, you're figuring out, okay, I know what I need, right? I know what I need to succeed at this the next time. Sometimes, however, it might be, there's nothing you did. It's just the way it works. Hey, I'm doing something competitive. Sometimes it's going to work. Sometimes it's not. I threw my hat in the ring. It didn't work out. It was a long shot anyways. There's nothing really to change. It just depends. But you want to figure out what went wrong, what adjustments need to be made. What's your plan going forward? Am I going to try again in this thing? Am I going to try to fix this paper? Am I going to overhaul the way I do my work? Am I going to take a corner of career capital and I'm really going to try to amplify it very systematically? Make a plan going forward based on what you learned. Write that plan down. Make sure it's in whatever systems you use. And now you were done thinking about the failure. You festered, you analyzed, you adjusted, you made a plan. Now you move on. If you find yourself having a hard time not snapping your attention back, which will happen especially if the thing was public or embarrassing. If you have a hard time not preventing your attention from continually snapping back to ruminating on the failure, you're going to deploy a modified version of cognitive behavioral therapy. You'll have a brief session in the morning before work and at the end of the workday where you will confront the rumination, the thinking about the thing that went wrong. You will point out where in that thinking there is distortions. Like, okay, here is the negative thought I'm coming back to. Here are the distortions in that thinking. And you can just Google cognitive behavioral therapy distortions. You'll see a whole list. And they have names. You want to use the name when you're doing this. It's black and white thinking. It's predicting the future. It's catastrophizing. You point out, here's the thought that's really bothering me. Here are the distortions. Here are their names. I have a plan for how to deal with this. I trust my plan. And now I will shut down confronting this rumination until the next session, the end of the workday or the next morning. When the thoughts come up again, you say, no. I did a CBT session on this morning. I have one coming up in a few hours. I'll get back to you, brain, when we get to that next session. And you consolidate your rumination to a couple times a day. During that time, you systematically point out distortions and confirm to yourself you have a plan. This works. Do this for a few days. If it's a really bad event, do it for a couple weeks. The urge to ruminate will dissipate. You'll be executing your plan and you'll move on. All right. So what's important is you can't just ignore rejection. The negative feelings that rejection or a negative event create, they're real. And if you pretend like they don't exist, your mind's not going to believe you because you're wrong. They matter. You need to do something with it. But if you give yourself some time to revel in it, to fester, and really make a good plan going forward, your mind will then be ready to move on. Okay, we do have a plan. We got into this. What's next? And you can use CBT to help yourself get there a little bit quicker. I do that all the time with various things I face. It works like a charm. All right, what do we got?
Next question is from Anonymous. You often talk about how you allocate a half day per week to your podcast. I'm in a similar situation with my own part-time project. I can't seem to find the discipline to consistently find time to work on it every week. In weeks that you have lots going on, how do you still find time to fit in that half day per week?
Well, I mean, I think your answer is you just got to get Jesse to show up, right? I got to come do this because Jesse's going to be here and he would be here all alone. And that makes me sad. So then that motivates me like, okay, I guess I gotta come do this podcast. If I don't, we're going to find Jesse here in like a long conversation with Jesse Skeleton, just trying to stave off the loneliness of boredom of being here all by myself. All right. No, seriously. Okay. You want to put regular work in on something. Logistically speaking, have a set time put on your calendar, treat it like any other appointment. So it's a big deal for you not to do it. Like if you have an appointment on your calendar, dentist, and you don't go, that's a big deal. You're saying, I'm choosing to reject this appointment. So do that, schedule regular time so that if you're just trying to figure out like, when do I want to do it this week? How do I feel? Do I want to do it now? If you're giving yourself a choice, it's easier for your mind to talk yourself out of it. So that's step one. Step two, make sure what you're doing makes sense. Like your mind is on board. It's easy to jump into the big, I want to put a lot of time aside. Let's just get into this. I want to be a writer. So let's write all day Friday. But if you don't know what that means, your mind doesn't trust you have a plan to become a successful writer. It knows you don't know very much about it. It knows you don't even know what you're going to do on those days. You just want to put your earthenware coffee cup and Instagram it and write in your bullet journal or whatever. If it knows you don't really have a good plan, it's like, come on, buddy. What are we doing here? So make sure you know, like the time you're putting aside is serving a plan that you understand and trust. Don't start with the time and then say, if I put aside this time, this will somehow induce me to make progress. Your mind's not going to buy that plan. And then three, you might need to ladder up. So go back to the discipline ladder that we talked about during the deep dive. If you're going from 0 to 5 hours a week on some big ambition, your mind might be like, I'm not used to doing something so hard that's optional and urgent. And this is weird and it feels indulgent and let's not do it. So you might need to be laddering here, right? You might need to be starting with every day I'm doing a little thing relevant to this project. And then I move up to like the 15-minute projects. And then it's 60 minutes, 3 times a week. I start with like an easy thing, then a harder thing. And now this type of work I'm not used to doing, optional side hustle work, is now something I'm doing regular time on, and the effort I'm giving to it's very hard. I'm very comfortable with the chemical obstacles to focused activity now in this particular type of pursuit. Now I think I'm ready to consolidate this on like Friday mornings. So you might also need to ladder up if your mind is not used to giving really serious attention to something that is like not part of your job or something that someone is demanding that you actually do. Or you just hire Jesse. Jesse, you're available for like anyone who wants you just to come to their house just so they'll be motivated.
Just drive my truck there.
Just drive your truck there. You'll hear them coming. All right. Oh, we got a slow productivity corner question?
Yes, we do.
All right. For those who aren't familiar, every week we like to do one question that's relevant to my new book, Slow Productivity, The Lost Art of Accomplishment Without Burnout. About half of what we talk about on the show is directly or indirectly related to this book. So if you haven't bought it yet, you need to. It's like the Bible for the Deep Questions podcast. But the real reason we do the Slow Productivity Corner question is so we can hear this segment theme music. Let's hear that music, Jesse. All right, what's our question today?
All right, today's question is from JR. How can an organization adopt slow productivity principles? For example, how can an academic department or college do fewer things, work at a natural pace, and obsess over quality? There is often a fixed number of non-negotiable projects, service, teaching, with set deadlines that detract from deep work in other areas, like research.
So the reality about projects and obligations in most workplaces is that there are vastly more things than that you could be doing than there is time to do them. We often tell ourselves a story. The story we tell ourselves is there's some ideal set of things that people want us to do or that we want to do. And if we can just accomplish this collection, then we're doing our job and be successful. And if we don't do everything in this collection, we're not going to do our job or be successful. And so in this way, we feel very bad saying no to things you're trying to reduce, like, because these are the things that need to be done. But the reality is, no, there's not some set of things that you need to do to be successful. There is a massive collection of things from which you are actually, whether you know it or not, sampling what can actually fit into your schedule. And so what people do, they're implicitly saying no all the time, because again, there's way more stuff than you could be doing. So what people do is they basically bring things into their professional life until they get sufficiently stressed that they have psychological cover to start saying no. But here's the thing. The difference between having enough stuff that it makes you stressed and pulling that back 20% so that you're not so stressed by the overhead of all you have to do. To the outside world, that difference is very small. No one knows the difference. But to your psychological reality, it makes a huge difference. So our workloads are arbitrary. That's what I want to say. Our workloads are arbitrary. We do 20% too much just because it's our heuristic for how we manage our load. When I'm stressed, I'll start saying no. This holds for professors as well. Yes, there are things you need to do. You have to teach your classes. You have to work on your research. That does not take up all your time. The amount of service you take on, that is highly malleable. The amount of overhead you take on surrounding your research and your classes is often also highly malleable. Most professors, contrary to the article we're going to read in the third segment, just kind of pile this stuff on until they're stressed and they start saying no. So what would an academic institution do, for example, to make workloads more reasonable? Here are some very specific ideas. I think there should be service budgets. Here's how many hours you can spend maximum working on service as a professor of a given rank at our university, and we track it, and you can't go above it. So yeah, there's more service than you could possibly ever fit into your day. So we might as well be clear about how much you should do. Instead of it being 20% too much, let's make it a reasonable number. I think universities should have service days. This day of the week, and in particular, this half of this day of the week, is when all meetings and calls, et cetera, related to service happen. It's got to fit in there. It doesn't just happen randomly throughout the week. This is when this stuff happens. Service should be something you're working on 1 day a week, and only maybe half of that day actually gets used up by calls. The university would still function if you did this, but we don't. I think individuals in the university setting should have quotas for important but unbounded request types, stuff they need to do, but there's an unbounded number of requests coming in. You need strict quotas. Here's how many peer reviews I do per semester. Here's how many non-departmental committees I sit on. If I'm being a journal area editor, here's what I take off of my plate to compensate. So it's not about not doing things. It's about having a reasonable quota for the number of important things that you do. I want to do reviews. I want to sit on committees. I want to take my turn as a journal editor. But I don't want to do too many reviews. I don't want to be on too many committees. I don't want to be an editor while I'm trying to do 3 other major things. So quotas, I think, make a really big difference. I also think academic institutions could do a good job of putting in more administrative support. We'll get into this more in the final segment. Universities are happy to bring in more administrators, but they don't invest as much in administrative support. So everything you take on your plate brings with it overhead, administrative overhead. It is the increase of that overhead past a certain point that makes work very unsustainable and stressful. So if you can reduce the overhead that comes with obligations, you increase the sustainability of professors' workloads. In general, if we move beyond academia, The thing organizations should care about is the ratio of administrative overhead to actual execution. Time spent supporting work, emails, meetings, discussions, versus time spent actually doing the work that has a clear value for the organization. If the ratio of overhead to work gets too high, your employees become much less useful. They also burn out. They also get exhausted. It is not the case. This is not a linear dose function. You cannot just keep increasing the amount of things you ask people to do and have an increase in the amount of work that they produce. It's a nonlinear equation. What actually happens here is that, you can think of it as like, if we're going to be nerdy, it's probably more like a quadratic shape going on here. As you get past a certain amount of work, the ratio of overhead to work gets high enough that there's not enough time left to actually make consistent progress on work, and the amount of work accomplished starts to go back down. So this is how institutions more generally can support slow productivity, is recognizing this reality. You cannot just endlessly give more work to people. It does not give you more and more actual work done. There's a sweet spot of overhead to execution in that ratio. And to hit that sweet spot, you got to be explicit about workload management. So I just don't like this idea that we're like, look, this is somehow like the happiness of employees versus work getting done. No, this is about, is work getting done or not? You put too much work on people's plates, less gets done. So I think the slow productivity principles are not just possible in organizations, they're imperative if you want to do better as an organization, be it academic or otherwise. All right, I feel like, Jesse, that means we should get a little bit more theme music. All right, do we have a call this week?
We do.
All right, let's hear it.
Okay.
Hi, Cal. This is Jonathan from Winnipeg. You talk a lot about process-centered emails, and it's all great. I love it, but here's the problem. Nobody reads their email. I've been sending these emails. I send long, detailed, very specific, very precise emails. Not necessarily overlong, but, it's got the information that people need. But they don't read them, Cal. They don't read them. What am I going to do? What do I do about this?
Oh, yeah, it's a real problem. Especially, I'll tell you this, that problem has gotten worse since I first introduced the idea of process-centric emails in my book, Deep Work. All right, so for the listener who doesn't know what we're talking about here, process-centric email is a method for reducing the number of unscheduled back and forth messaging required to accomplish a project or objective, right? So the default way people get things done in the knowledge work context is we just sort of shoot emails back and forth or Slack messages. We kind of figure it out on the fly. This is a problem because if completing an objective requires that we get through an unscheduled back and forth interaction, I have to parry those messages back to you pretty quickly, right? Like if we're going to figure this out, it's going to take 10 back and forth messages. We're going to figure it out today. I got to see your next message probably within like 10 or 15 minutes of it arriving, just so that we have time for this conversation to play out. Now, the problem with this is if I have to see your message within the next 10 or 15 minutes, I have to keep checking my inbox. This is where the bulk of chronic inbox checking comes from, not a failure of will or bad productivity habits, but because we have these ongoing unscheduled conversations we have to service. So with process-centric emailing, what you do is when you initiate via email one of these projects, we need to work on this together, you describe in your first email the process by which you're going to collaborate on this project to get it done. And the process you describe should hopefully prevent for you to have to use unscheduled messaging. So like the classic example here is where you say like, okay, here's what we're going to do. We got to get this report back to the client by Thursday. And you lay out the process. You say, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk to the team during our status meeting today, and then I'll edit this document. And I will put my edits into this shared folder by the end of business today. Please look at it some point tomorrow. I'm going to take it back, annotate it with any questions, make any edits you want. I have that done by 3:00 tomorrow and put the new version in the shared folder. I'm going to pick it up and do a final edit and send it to the designer tomorrow afternoon. The designer will have this done by noon the next day. Any final comments have to me by like 3 o'clock. You just annotate the document and I'll do the final submittal that afternoon. That's a process-centric email because you've described using shared locations and time deadlines, how the collaboration is going to happen. No more emails need to be sent. So this project will now get executed without you having to receive a single unscheduled message and reply to it. The caller is pointing out correctly that increasingly people don't read those emails. And they don't read those emails because this hyperactive hive mind we're constantly communicating mode of work has gotten worse since 2016 when I first published that book. We have a lot more Slack than we had back then. Slack wasn't even around. I think I talked about in Deep Work, and we'll have to check this, Jesse, but I think the instant messenger service I talked about was HipChat. I don't know if you remember HipChat, but like,
No.
yeah, it was like one of the early instant messengers. It was mainly used among developers.
Okay.
Yeah, it was even before Slack. We're so hyperactive now that, yeah, people don't even read the emails because they have so much messaging that now it's like they are being bombarded and you're just trying to knock these things back as quick as possible. You're just typing as fast as you can type to get a message temporarily off of your plate. Me like talk soon, send, right? It's like just caveman emailing, just trying to get things off your plate as quickly as possible. No one's reading them. So it is a problem. The solution is the walk through the process real time, right? I think that tends to work better. Let me just talk to you about how we should do this. And when you're talking to someone in real time, they actually have to listen. They're going to hear it. So if you're at the office, grab them in the hallway, grab them in their office, grab them at the end of a meeting. Hey, let me just talk to you for 5 minutes. You can do, if your relative ranks make this possible, you could just tell them in your response to the email, like, yeah, let's make a plan for this. I have some ideas. Stop by my next office hours when you can. Hopefully you have office hours. Or if you don't, just say, yeah, give me a call when you can, and we'll walk through a process for this. You probably just have to move the process description to synchronous. It has to be real-time conversation. And then they'll get on board with it. Hidden benefit, 50% of the things will disappear because people don't want to do that little bit of friction. It's not an urgent project, but they want to get it out of their inbox. They're like, we do this good, right? Question mark emoji, send, right? They're trying to get it off their plate. Like, yeah, we should do this. Like, technically I made progress on this. And when they get called back with like an actual friction point, like, oh, I have to actually call this person or stop by their office at some point and talk about this. You're like, you know what? I like option B, which is we don't really need to do this. So 50% of your projects will go away. My old department chair was really good at this. You say, call me, we'll talk about it. And it would filter out. That would filter out a lot of things. I think his other trick, which I really liked, was like if you just blurted out a complaint in a faculty meeting, just like, this is terrible, faculty meeting stuff. He'd be like, yeah, we have a very simple process. We're happy to talk about any topic. You just have to submit it in writing 2 weeks before the next faculty meeting. I'll disseminate it for comment, and then we'll put it on the agenda for the faculty meeting. 95% of things that people are complaining about, they're not going to do that for. And it really cut down. So, give people a little bit of friction, and you'll be surprised by. You can reverse this. So if they're at a higher rank, offer to do more work. It's like, yeah, I think we should talk this through briefly, how best to do it. Let me know when I can call you or stop by your office, and I'll come find you and figure this out. That'll work as well. You're working the relative ranks well. You're not trying to give work. You're actually saying, I'm willing to do work on your behalf. I will come find you. I will call you. Bosses are so busy that, again, like 5 times out of 10, they'll just not respond to that, and the thing's off your plate. Friction's great. All right, I believe we have a case study here. This is where people write in with examples of putting the type of things we talk about on this show into action in their own life. A good way to see what this advice looks like in the wild. Today's case study comes from Mike. Mike says, recently I leveraged my career capital completely by accident. I was a freelancer at a small professional services firm, working in a role I already had 10 years of experience in. Things were going great until they were purchased by a large conglomerate. The new conglomerate offered to keep me as a freelancer on the condition that I transition to a different role. I gave the new role a good try for 6 months, but I just couldn't get the hang of it. Plus, I was wanting to take a break from work altogether to focus on some personal things. My spouse and I both have aging parents. We have a ton of renovations we need to do to our house. My plan was to take a year off work to focus on those things and then come back and find work in my original specialization. So I put in my notice. But I was surprised by the reaction. They said they loved my work in the original position, and if I was willing, they would switch me back to that. They knew I wanted to focus on my personal life, but they still didn't want to lose me altogether. So they offered to increase my hourly rate and let me focus only on projects I specialized in, all on a part-time basis. I didn't ask for this flexibility, but they recognized my career capital better than I did. As a result, I now work 3 days a week in the role I specialize in, and I have nothing to do with the task that I was bad at. I make almost as much money as I previously did. I use my extra time to take care of my parents and my spouse's parents, work on house repairs, and I've even joined an adult sports league. From time to time, I have taken on an extra short-term consulting client for some extra money if it fits my schedule. My life is deeper. My work hours are spent where I provide the most value, and I have more non-work hours devoted to things that are important for my marriage and family. My only regret is not taking the lessons of career capital sooner. Mike, that's a great case study. Here's the thing about career capital, which is our term for your rare and valuable skills, the main leverage you have for shaping your career. One of the most important types of career capital you can build is just be someone who is reliable and gets things done. That's what I tell young people all the time. The thing, I know it's not sexy, but the thing you need to care about, especially early in your job, is you're organized, you do the things you're going to do, you say you're going to do, and you get them done on time. Nothing falls through the cracks, and you do work at a reasonable level of quality, right? Like, okay, there's an issue here, I'm going to solve this issue. If people trust you're going to do work, you're going to get it done on time, and you're not going to be a problem, and the work's going to be good quality, you don't have to be a superstar. That is incredibly valuable. Now, here's the thing. From the employer perspective, they are desperate to find people who meet those traits. They're reliable. They get things done. They do it well. They do it on time. I can trust them. They're desperate for people like that. And they do not want to see people like that go. It is the easiest, most powerful type of career capital that you can build. So yes, sometimes when we talk about career capital, we kind of get into the exciting territory of you're deliberately practicing some sort of 10x skill that makes you such a superstar that you can just say, I'm going to work from a boat and I'm going to work 1 day a week, 3 weeks a year, and you're going to pay me $1 million. Like, it's like the exciting scenarios of becoming like the superstar. You don't have to become a superstar like Mike showed to gain the leverage needed to craft a really deep life. He was good at what he did. He did it well. He was reliable. He was dependable. His employer's like, we don't want you to go. And when you're in that situation, you can craft really interesting things. And like from their point of view, him working 3 days a week versus 5, like it's fine. It's all pretty similar to them. But for Mike, it makes a really big difference. So I like it. That's a great example of career capital in action. You don't have to become LeBron James. If you're someone who can just consistently guard against a jump shot and get a good number of boards per game, team's happy to keep you on the floor. How'd my basketball analogy go there, Jesse?
Not bad.
Not bad. I was kind of stretching there.
They yesterday LeBron and his son played in a preseason game together.
Oh yeah? Okay, here's a naive question. Does LeBron's son play professional basketball? Who is he?
Yeah, he got drafted by the Lakers, but
was he the same age as his dad when he got? I remember his dad got drafted.
No, he's a little bit older, but there was a little bit of.
Did he play college ball?
Yeah.
Okay.
Was he one of the best players in college basketball? No.
I mean, LeBron got drafted at 16 out of high school.
Right,
right?
out of high school, yeah.
See, I know a lot about basketball.
If anybody has any case studies, they can email me at jesse@calnewport.com.
Yes, we love them. So jesse@calnewport.com, send them in. All right, we got a cool final segment here. I'm going to put myself on trial, but first, let's hear from another sponsor. Going online without ExpressVPN is like driving a car without car insurance. Like, you might be a great driver, and a lot of times you'll get away with it. But there's a lot of crazy people on the road these days. It's eventually going to catch up with you, so why take that risk? That's what it's like going online without a VPN. All right, so here's the issue. When you connect to the internet, you might think you're safe because you're using a quote-unquote encrypted connection. The nerds know this as the SSL protocol. The problem is that just encrypts the body of your packet, but the header, which says who you are and who you're talking to, that remains plain, open to the public. So if I'm sitting next to you at a coffee shop, I could have a special radio card. I can see exactly what sites and services you're using. If I'm your internet service provider at home, your home internet service provider, I can see exactly what sites and services you're using, and I can collect that information. I can sell that information, and they do that. When you use a VPN, you get rid of the ability to snoop on you in that way, because with a VPN, you take the site or service you want to talk to, you take the message, you encrypt the whole message, and you send it to a VPN server. So all the person sniffing your packets or the internet service provider sees is that you're talking to a VPN server. That's all they learn. Then the VPN server unencrypts your original message and talks to the site and service on your behalf, encrypts the response, and sends it back. You now have complete privacy about what you are doing online. All right. So you need a VPN. If you're going to use a VPN, I suggest ExpressVPN. The encryption they use is super secure. The number of bits that they're using in their encryption configuration would require a supercomputer over 1 billion years to crack. So it's not going to be broken into. It's very easy to use. It's one of the things I like best about ExpressVPN. You just press a button on whatever device you're using that you've set this up on, and now all the internet stuff you do is protected. Use your apps, use your browser. You don't even know it. It's all transparent. Your phone, your laptop, your tablet, it'll work. ExpressVPN is rated #1 by top tech reviewers like CNET and The Verge. All right. So you need a VPN. If you're going to use a VPN, I recommend using ExpressVPN. Secure your online data today by visiting expressvpn.com/deep. That's EXPRESSVPN.com/deep. You can get an extra 3 months free, but only when you go to expressvpn.com/deep. I also want to talk about our friends at My Body Tutor. I've known Adam Gilbert, My Body Tutor's founder, for many years. He used to be the fitness advice columnist for my blog back in the early days. His company, My Body Tutor, has been a big success because it solves the #1 problem in getting healthy, which is consistency. It's not hard to figure out what you should be doing. It's hard to actually do it. And so what My Body Tutor offers is a online coach who works with you to develop your plan about nutrition and exercise. And then you check in with this coach every day using the My Body Tutor app. And that gives you that accountability, is what gives you consistency. Knowing you need to talk to your coach every day and report how it went is what gives you that extra push you need to actually follow through on the plan you put together. In addition, having a coach means you have someone who's on your team when you need to make changes or adjust. Maybe you have like a holiday coming up and you want to change, like, how am I going to exercise? We're going to be traveling. I worry about what's going to happen with my diet. The coach can work with you to make a plan for your specific needs. So if you want to get in better shape, I suggest My Body Tutor. If you mention deep questions when you sign up, you will get $50 off your first month. So please remember to do that. So go to mybodytutor.com. That's TUTOR, mybodytutor.com, and mention deep questions when you sign up to get $50 off. All right, let's do our final segment. All right, we haven't done a good reaction segment in a while. This is where we react to something that has been sent to us from the internet. I got an article right now from City Journal. I'm going to load this up on the screen for people who are watching instead of listening. All right, the headline is Professor MIA, and it shows someone reading a book. I don't know, it looks like the Caribbean overlooking the water. I think it's a problem, Jesse, that like immediately on seeing that picture, my reaction is like, oh, I want to do that. That guy's got it figured out. I'm going to read a little bit about this. The article starts, I could really read the whole article. I could try to be selective here. It starts by saying it's no secret that a lot of students are coming to campus unfamiliar with skills, habits, and behaviors that are necessary to succeed at college level work. Basic things like, I'm eliding some of the article here. Basic things like the importance of meeting deadlines, paying attention, being respectful in the classroom, and more complicated skills like knowing how to annotate readings and cope with time management problems. Many of the faculty, this is kind of quoting someone here. I'm sorry, I'm kind of eliding this. Many of the faculty are uninterested in this kind of instruction because it departs sharply from the role many instructors prefer, that of a knowledge expert who leads learners through the course content. All right. As this goes on, at more elite schools, these issues are also evident. Faculty devote less and less time to teaching, leaving students to fend for themselves. Quote, quote, quote. Quote, quote, quote. All right, they're talking about how like students are just doing less stuff in the classroom and more stuff on their own. All right, the conclusion here is professors aren't doing enough. So the article person does some math here, the author. A 3-course load over the span of a year is the maximum required for faculty members at these institutions, with a total of 28 weeks of classes, and each class requiring 2 hours of classroom instruction. The third hour is often conducted by a teaching assistant. That amounts to about 125 hours of classroom time, or about 15 to 16 8-hour days. Let's add that to the 3 hours a week that professors spend in office hours, and let's add another full day per week that they spend preparing for classes. Let's also add some time spent grading. You still wind up with just over 40 full-time days per year. Even many faculty administrative duties seem to have disappeared. Professors were once responsible not only for chairing a department and advising students, but also for running entire programs. They would advise students about studying abroad, combining majors, or enrolling in other interdisciplinary initiatives. Now, because of ballooning college administrations, faculty have been relieved of many of these roles. This has the effect not only of separating many student programs from intellectual pursuits, but also of fostering fewer interactions between students and professors. The decline in faculty classroom and student time has coincided with an explosion in academic publishing. No matter what the discipline, faculty are expected to publish their research. Is it more worthwhile to impart knowledge to undergraduates or to write articles for sociology and literature journals? All right, so the idea here is professors are lazy, that if we add up the time we spend teaching in the classroom, it's not that much compared to a full-time job. And so what are we doing? We must be reading on the beach. What we should be doing is spending much more time, I guess, teaching more classes and teaching students, to quote this earlier, skills like how to read and deal with time management. Well, first of all, I'll say with this podcast, I think I'm single-handedly taking on for all of my faculty brethren around the world here the obligation to teach our students how to do time management and read and organize their lives. So you can say thank you. I'm taking on all that time for you. Let's step out to the bigger question here. There is a fundamental misunderstanding, I think, in this article about what it is that professors are meant to do, especially at what she calls or he calls elite institutions in the U.S. I think it's probably worth clarifying here. Elite institutions in the U.S. follow the German research university model. This is something that was kind of innovated in the late 1800s, and we picked up here in the U.S. in the early 20th century, and has been at the core of the U.S.'s sort of dominant position in science and technology that we've had over the last 100 years. The German model is a model in which the professor's goal, broadly speaking, is to advance cutting-edge knowledge in an area of expertise. This means research, and this means supervising the next generation of scholars to sort of continue the promulgation of the body of knowledge, an effort that is mainly captured in doctoral student supervision. So you're training future professors and researchers and expanding a body of knowledge. Now, in the U.S. system, we marry that research German model. We marry that with the college model, right? We have this sort of like classic college model in the U.S., which is about preparing undergraduates. So we say, what we should do is these professors, they should also teach a lot of the classes that the undergraduates are taking so that they can be exposed. The undergraduates, as part of their broader training and experience, intellectual and otherwise, can be exposed to like leading minds on things. They can hear about these topics from leading the leading subject matter experts. And that's kind of like a more inspiring way of learning it. It like connects you to the trajectory of the field. And that's an important thing. And so teaching undergraduates is an important piece of academic life at research institutions. It is far from the core, though. So it is somewhat absurd to be counting the time that like world-class subject matter experts at research universities spend teaching undergraduates and say somehow that should be the thing you do that matters. It's an important piece. Like it's a good complement to what a professor does at a research university. We take teaching undergraduates seriously. But the idea that this is what the bulk of our time should be actually is not compatible with the model of these universities. The focus on which promotion happens at U.S. research universities, so promotion to associate professor with tenure and subsequent promotion to full professor, those promotions are based almost entirely on intellectual contribution to the world of ideas. Teaching is involved in these cases, but only as a disqualifier. If you are bad in the classroom, that can and should hold you back from being promoted. We do not want a professor at one of these institutions who cannot teach well, but you cannot get promoted on being a good teacher. The thing that gets you promoted is confidential letters solicited from subject matter experts in your field that starkly and frankly assess the intellectual caliber of your work. How good is his or her work? What is its impact on the field? What institutions would this person be promoted at? What institutions would they not be promoted at? Who in their similar rank are they comparable to? Who at their similar rank is better? These are really kind of frank and somewhat brutal letters. So the promotion process emphasizes advancing the world of ideas. And I think this is actually a very good model. This focus on trying to induce top minds to become subject matter experts does push forward knowledge. And again, it's the US's embrace of this research institution model is why on so many different fields we lead in the world. And it makes a really big difference. So it is a good model. And I like the aspect of the model that says, okay, you should spend time with undergraduates teaching some classes. This article says, people teach 3. Actually, at the real elite universities, they teach 2 or less, right? That is not a problem. Having a world-class physicist, spend most of their time in the classroom doesn't make as much sense as having a world-class physicist teaching some of the physics classes so that students can be exposed and excited, but also spending a lot of time trying to advance their understanding of the fundamental nature of the universe. So whatever, this is not particularly relevant, I guess, to people's day-to-day here, but I wanted to give a little bit of defense of professordom. We take undergraduate teaching seriously. We are not primarily teachers. And it's interesting, I think, for a lot of undergraduates or parents of undergraduates who are used to having this employer-employee relationship with universities. Everyone works for me and my kids. It's a little bit different to see there's a whole model and purpose for these universities that goes beyond just the experience of the 18 and 22-year-olds who are there, who are the future, and we want to have a good experience, but it's not the whole orientation of the university. It's not just entirely about serving that population. So I don't know. There we go. Professors aren't lazy. It's a hard job. It's hard to advance knowledge in your field. It's hard to have a job where you're fired unless you can prove to experts in your field that you are have significantly moved the needle. It's one of the few jobs you can't just keep it by doing good work and being reliable and getting things done. It's a job you have to keep earning to keep. It's a very difficult job, and it's an exciting job. And I think it's a good system. And we love undergrads, but we shouldn't be teaching more.
Are you still writing a lot of papers?
Yeah, I'm doing more now. Yes. Though I'm working on some papers right now that are more in the digital ethics realm and less in theoretical computer science. So I'm sort of exploring the academic world surrounding technology and society.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's a lot of fun. I'm teaching math in the spring. Looking forward to it. But give me 4 more classes. I don't know who that's helping because I couldn't do anything else. Any of the research I'm doing, any of the papers, any of the programs. Oh, and by the way, all the things you say professors don't do anymore, all the things you say you would, like advising students on majors and study abroad programs, that's all I do. I'm the director of undergraduate studies. That's all we do. It is true that there's many more administrators at college campuses than before. Those administrators are not serving professors that take stuff off their plate. They largely generate new work for the professors. They're running programs and new initiatives. The increase in administrators on campuses does not reduce the administrative work that professors do. I think it only increases it. So I just want to push back on that. So there we go. A little apologia, as they say, for the academic life. All right. Well, thank you everyone for listening. I think my voice barely held out. One day I will have my voice back, but I think we made it through. So I'm happy about that. We'll be back next week with another episode. And until then, as always, stay deep. Hey, if you like today's discussion about the discipline ladder, you should also listen to episode 310, which is titled Rethinking Discipline, where I focus on another way to increase your discipline capacity. Check it out. So I've been thinking a lot recently about discipline. Now, I don't mean punishing other people. I also don't mean those performative shows on social media where you brag about how many miles you can run or how many minutes you can survive a cold plunge. I mean instead the quiet contentment of consistently making progress on things that are hard right now, but move you towards meaningful goals in the future.